So this is going to be my off-meta warrior build guide, and I'm going to go over 3 builds here. One is going to be a core warrior DPS, the second is going to be a support berserker, and the third is going to be a heavy CC spellbreaker. So one thing to remember when looking at these off-meta builds is that the purpose is to explore the build crafting of the game and be creative, right? But if that sacrifices a lot of the fun of the class, like if the build is too clunky or something like that, then often it's not really worth it, right? Because fun is the end goal, right? So a lot of times some of my builds will seem like they're not too creative, but it's gone through a lot of iteration to find what's fun, but also a kind of like an off-meta take of what that fun is, right? And obviously warriors in the current meta are going to be revolving around might and the strength trait line. Not too much Condi going around. It's just a lot of great sword and a lot of might, and might makes right. And yeah, shake it off and bull's charge are hard meta, so you're going to see these often. I think shake it off is in every build, and for good reason, because the skill is insanely busted, right? But obviously the core warrior build is going to be using axe, sword, shield, and the meta axe warrior is axe shield with greatsword. I choose to use sword shield because shield is kind of like a necessary component of any warrior build. If you don't have shield stance, then you're going to be really easy to focus, even if you have greatsword for mobility. So what I do is I take sword shield so that I can have mobility and shield stance, and then I can sort of play around having double axe, right? Because you can't just put a greatsword down and have a shield on something and then have a secondary axe as well, right? Because that'd be 3 weapon sets. So basically what this build has is it's an axe mastery build. So I gain ferocity for each axe I'm wielding, which adds up to 240 because I have 2. And it also gives you 2 adrenaline each time you crit. And I'm going to be critting a lot because I have Fury whenever I hit Axe 2. And you're going to hit a lot with Whirling Axe as well. So you'll gain adrenaline pretty quickly. And also recharge reduction, so all of these skills are very low cooldown and you get massive DPS uptime. If you can, if you get a little bit of support from your team, or if you land some CCs, you'll do a lot of damage. So yeah, Brawler's recovery, this is obvious. Just more might here. Fast hands is pretty meta for warriors. And then warrior sprint, this is a double melee build. You got some leaps in here to remove immobilize, so that's always good. And you gain adrenaline on weapon swap as well. That's pretty normal. Discipline is pretty standard. The only thing interesting here is axe mastery, right? And that's a decision to get some big damage, and obviously you want to still have a shield, so sword shield is the replacement for greatsword. Now in strength you get reckless dodge, which makes you do an unblockable damage on your dodge, which is really good because it can also remove blind and help you land a lot of your axe skills. Peak performance, this is pretty standard. It just makes you have lower cooldown on bull's charge, which is really strong. And yeah, burst skills give you endurance, more dodges equals more reckless dodges, which means more might if you land that, which means more might makes right, which whenever you gain might you heal and gain endurance, so there's just this omega synergy with might and warriors, so that's kind of why this is meta. And then obviously might gives you more power, so you just want to be stacking might for really big damage. And here I have forceful greatsword. Even though I'm not using a greatsword, it's pretty much the best thing you can get because body blow, yeah, you kind of put out weakness when you CC, but it's not really that necessary, because if they're CC, then the weakness doesn't do too much to them, right? They can't attack anyways. And then vitality isn't really that important on warriors. They already have really good base vitality. So the thing about this is it actually gives you might when you crit. Even if you're not wielding a greatsword, it's just a 50% chance. It doubles these stats when you're wielding a greatsword, right? And it also gives you 120 power on top of that. And then it doubles that if you're using a greatsword. But yeah, so half of those stats and might generation is fine, because that still helps this build out, right? It's not as good as it could be, but it's still pretty good. And then in tactics, we're just taking sort of a shout synergy build here, and you get more might generation when you land a burst skill, and that's pretty important because you want to be getting might as usual. Deal increased damage for each boon on me. I actually get some pretty decent boons here. I get quickness, I get fury, I get might. I don't know about swiftness. You don't really get swiftness. So yeah, just 3 boons, which is, it's okay. It's not that great. And then passive shake it off, which is just it's a nice little stun break sometimes. Like if the first thing that hits you in combat puts a condition on you, then it'll stun break that. So it's a really good front-loaded passive kind of ability. And then mending might, whenever you apply might, you heal. So it's like double synergy with might makes right, which I think is a little bit over the top. But and then obviously vigorous shouts. You gain healing power based on a percentage of your power. You're going to be gaining a lot of power, which means you're going to be gaining a lot of healing. And even though a lot of your skills don't have healing coefficients, the shouts kind of do. And yeah, that gives you a little bit more survivability, which allows you to stay in fights long enough to do your damage. And the recharge reduction on your shouts is really good because Shake It Off is a shout, and it's a really long cooldown, but if you it's a high impact skill, so the more you can use it, the more survivability you'll have, right? So it's a pretty survivable build with yeah, really good damage. You'll see the damage soon. It's really over the top damage. For the build, so I have Demolisher and Strength runes. Obviously that makes sense here. Courage rune on Axe with cleansing, because I just like extra cleansing on warrior, because that's kind of like the counter to warriors. And sword shield, I have energy and battle. So just might generation sigils and then survivability sigils. You can do some weird thing with like on your axe or even your sword, where you take stagnation sigil, and what that does is it gives you cripple when you swap to that weapon. And I didn't actually mention leg specialist yet. I forgot to mention that because it's actually a really big component of this build. So cripple becomes immobilize, right? So with that stagnation sigil, you will immobilize. But I feel that you're not usually swapping on top of people. You're usually swapping and then trying to close the gap afterwards. So I don't like stagnation sigil that much. But leg specialist is still really good because you have a lot of cripples with this build, and anyone who has immobilizing condition on them will get 7% more damage. So you can and it's a 5-second ICD, so you have to you can't just spam out immobilize, but you can get some nice combos off. So throw axe is a cripple, and that will give you an immobilize from range. And then sword 2 is a cripple, and so is your sword auto. So that's really good for setting up a lot of your burst combos, which will do a lot of damage. So yeah, that's pretty much the build. You obviously want to take Bull's Charge for great justice, Shake It Off, Healing Signet. A lot of people think that Mending is good. It's not, because it has a cast time. This heals you without having a cast time, so you never have the risk of getting interrupted, and you never have to stop dealing damage to start healing, right? So it allows you to completely ignore one aspect of your sustain, right? Because all your sustain is is instant cast. So you can just play very aggressively on this build. So yeah, on sword, you pretty much use this as a kiting weapon set, but you can also use it to set up some burst combos. So like my sword 2 will immob here, and then from the immob I can go into a stun with shield bash. So something like this, and then shield bash, and then 2, and then 5 on axe, and you can do mega damage. And obviously you want to do axe 2 before the axe 5 because it has such a fast animation that it basically just gives you fury into your axe 5, and you almost lose no time into your axe 5 for it. Like, this is one of the fastest abilities in the game, so you always want to use it when you're on top of the enemy. And yeah, so if you have extra time, so like if you land a really good bull's charge, you can use 4 into the quickness, and then 2, and then into 5. But generally people are going to be dodging you very often because you do insane damage. They're going to be scared. So yeah, you want to just go into your whirling axe as fast as possible, so you can yeah, just get off that damage. You'll get tons of damage even if they dodge. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. You just kite around with your sword shield. One thing that's interesting is that since you don't really use eviscerate too often because it's kind of clunky and you can get a lot of damage from all of your other axe skills anyways, you can actually use flurry quite a bit, and you don't need to cast the whole thing to land it. So you can do flurry and then cancel it, and you've got a 3-second immobilize, and that's obviously going to give you more immobilize for leg specialist, which gives you 7% damage. And then yeah, you can go from there and do insane damage to someone. So like if I go into flurry, I can, well, say I go into sword 2 and then I miss this and I miss that, I still have a chance to set up another burst with flurry, and then I go into axe 2, axe 5, and then, you know, it's big damage. You don't really want to use axe 4 too often. It's kind of a greedy skill, but yeah, if you know you can land it, like say on like really bunkerish matchups, then yeah, this can give you some good value. But generally, you have enough damage without it, and yeah, that's pretty good. And obviously, landing this will give you might, right? So it's pretty good. So yeah, that's pretty much the core warrior build. You have insane damage and insane might generation, and your axe 5 ability does 21k damage if it lands the whole thing, but that's going to be hard to do because people are going to be running from you. Okay, so here's a core warrior game, and yeah, so the role of this build is to play a DPS. You're not really 1v1ing that much. While you can 1v1, you prefer to go into a team fight and just do massive damage, and yeah, just help your team lock down targets with your immobilizes, and then just, you know, cut right in. So here at the start, I try to bait people because I know they're stealthing. I try to bait them onto me, and I try to run away, but I get jumped on by a thief, a core mesmer, and I think that's a Sikkim ranger. But my rev does get the counter pressure and gets it down there, so I need to run back here from spawn and get back into this. So yeah, this build it's actually not that squishy. Like, this is probably just as squishy as like a normal core warrior, because I mean, you just have axe, shield, and then greatsword. So I mean, obviously greatsword has a lot more mobility than a sword, and it has an evade. But it's pretty close in survivability. Like, anyone would get destroyed by being chased in that situation, right? So, and here I land my sword burst for the immobilize on that ranger there, which allows us to focus that down. One thing that's really good is that combo where you do the F1 burst at max adrenaline, and then you just swap to, you know, you cancel the burst because you don't really want to do the burst. You just want to do the initial immobilize, and then yeah, you swap to like axe and then do your actual damage there. So here Yeah, what's really nice about this build is, like, if this thief were trying to get away, both of my weapon sets have pretty good chase potential, right? Because the sword can chase because it has the leap, and the axe can chase because it has the axe throw. So it's not like being in one weapon set ever really feels that bad unless you're being chased. In the axe, you don't really have too many defenses in that, so you generally stay in sword shield. Here, what I'm doing is I stand off the node until they stand on it, because there's no real reason for me to allow them to get the jump on me until I need to contest the node, right? So, and then when I'm in the outnumbered situation, I use Rampage because it gives you a lot of defense, and that allows my team to help me on the node. And now I can sort of I can kite out if I need to. It looks like I'm not really doing that. Okay, yeah. So I get my shield stance off and I get out of the fight, and yeah, it looks like this fight is kind of even. So what I do here is so we're trying to focus the firebrand here, and what I did was I do the axe 3 into dodge roll to try to get on top of the enemy and get as much time out of my immobilize as possible, right? So when I do like the dodge roll into the axe 3, I'm basically banking on my immobilize hitting, because if it doesn't hit, then I'm still gaining ground on them. But if I wait to use my abilities, they're going to get out of the immobilize, right? So I try to get in there as soon as the immobilize hits, so that I get as much axe 5 or axe 2 into that immobilize as I can before they're allowed to dodge again, right? And it looks like we are dying here, so I'm trying to be safe. Like, I don't want to push into that 1v2 like a normal warrior would. I just want to kind of stay with my team and get kills. And I see him getting shot by a ranger, so I go to line of sight. I go back, and I see that the ranger has actually one-shotted my guardian. So now I'm going to be outnumbered, which is unfortunate because, well, actually, got some nice bursts on this ranger with the CC, and the axe 3 did 6k damage. And then I just used Rampage in the 1v2. Like, once I get the down, Rampage is a really safe way of cleaving a down body because it gives you so much defense and it gives you pretty decent damage, right? It's not as strong as it used to be, but it's kind of like there's no way to counter pressure you unless they have a lot of conditions. But yeah, so here I go back in the mid to secure these kills, and as you can see, a 20k roll secures that kill very quickly, and make sure that Mesmer can't do any funny business and like rally. So yeah, now I'm chasing the Mesmer to home, and I said that I can't really 1v1 that well, but this is a core Mesmer, so it's kind of like I'm a low tier 1v1er, but I'm still a 1v1er, right? A core Mesmer can't 1v1 me. So a lot of things this is actually pretty decent against, but like if I were to go against a Spellbreaker, then yeah, I'm unfavored in that matchup. So yeah, you can try to take 1v1s, but be very careful about what matchups you take. So like right here, this is a Spellbreaker, right? So this is not a good matchup for me. And I just try to go aggressive. My axe 5 actually isn't hitting, but I do land my axe 4, which gets them below 50% HP, which is pretty nice. And yeah, obviously the big difference there is, right, they have full counter and I don't. And that's what makes Spellbreaker so much better in 1v1s, right? It's so much more defense and counter pressure at the same time. So I go into Rampage here, and yeah, we're just gonna press W on this warrior here. I'm playing very safely though because I don't know where the warrior is. I get my nice F1 immob off, but I don't really do too much damage into it because it looked like they had endure pain or something. Or was that full counter? But yeah, I was playing very safe there, but I didn't really need to because my firebrand was supporting me. Didn't really end up being too bad though for me to play safe. So yeah, I capped the node, and now at mid, it looks like we're already getting kills, but I need to go in there and secure those kills, right? So I just immediately axe 2 into axe 5 to get the Fury and then the Omega Cleave, right? So there's no chance in like any kind of like weird stuff happening where they maybe rally or something. No, just that's the one thing that this build is really good at, is making sure that we win cleave situations. And here I do a nice axe 5 there. It did like 12k damage. And I also, they kind of like took a weird path where they were kind of robotic in their pathing, and I took the I kind of like cut them off there, right, to get more ground on them, which allowed me to catch up with my axe 5. This is a 2v2, so I have to be careful here because I'm the one that's going to be focused in the 2v2. So I start kiting off, and I go back to the node. This is a really bad matchup. Guardians actually counter Core Warrior. They don't counter Spellbreaker, but they counter Core Warrior for sure. And well, especially this version of Core Warrior, because I don't really have that many ways to deal with the blind and massive conditions. And I also make like a lot of mistakes in this matchup. It maybe is possible to win, but I play it very poorly there, and I kind of fumble around. So yeah, I just leave. The thing is, Guardian doesn't really have that much kill potential on you. And what I'm doing here is I'm just running as far back as possible so that the Mesmer can't stealth engage on me. So they can't decap the node while they're in stealth either, but if they attack me, they can de-stealth, and they can also one-shot me. But if I'm not on the node, then it'll force them to come chase me to kill me, which means they won't be on the node, or to wait until they're stealth to start decapping. So, and as soon as they de-stealth, I can jump on the node, right? So it basically negates the fact that they have a stealth opener for me to just not stand on the node. And I get tethered here, but I don't really care because we own the node. I'm going to probably... What I'm looking at on the map right now is that we got to kill at home. So we probably don't need to go there. But it is a thief, and they might... Yeah, I'm actually going to go back to mid. I'm kind of like trying to decide what I want to do here. So I can support my Firebrand there and give them a little bit of healing and Condi cleanse if I want to use my shouts for them, which is kind of nice, right? Having the ability to have a little bit more presence in a 2v2 because you have a little bit of team support. But yeah, my Guardian kind of got chased off there, and then they retargeted to me. So actually I was not ready for that at all, and then I got hard CC'd. I didn't use my stun break correctly or something. It is very easy to focus down if I don't have my cooldowns. So at this point though, it looks like all we need is to really just play one node to win. So I'm just gonna go into where my team is and just make sure that they win everything. And I try to prevent the decap there, but they get it at the last second. So all I'm doing is I see the Firebrand, and even though it's like a bad matchup for me, it's a good matchup to focus the Firebrand in a team fight, right? So I just do that combo where I, try to immobilize them so they can't dodge on top of them for unblockable damage, and then immediately do my axe skills, which are, they're very quick, right? So Aegis is ignored in a way because I'll remove the Aegis very quickly. And I'm getting chased off by the Longbow Ranger, but I use Rampage to escape. And I think at this point I can just hide behind this Ranger and we'll just win because the Ranger will hold the node. If they have to go for the kill on the Ranger, I can fight back. And if they go for me, well then the Ranger just holds the node, so there's really nothing they can do. So yeah, that's the Core Warrior. There are a lot of situations where the Core Warrior can do insane high damage to like carry team fights in like cleave situations. So that's kind of like the main purpose of the build, is just like getting kills really fast. And with the support, this is really good. Right, so next we have a Berserker build, and how this build works is it's sort of a supportish kind of build, but it also does some really good damage. So the role isn't really support, it's more of like a roaming support. So you go in, you make plays, and then you go out. Or you can sort of like +1 a DPS and kind of keep them alive, while also being able to kill with them. And so how this build works is you have shouts, right? Same stuff, but you also have Warhorn, which is a really power creeped weapon right now, because your 4 skill gives Fury, Swiftness, removes all inhibiting conditions, it's a blast, and it gives a unique buff to allies, which increases their next 2 attacks by 25% damage. So this is a really good skill. And there's some nice combos you can do with like maybe Final Thrust and Savage Leap, even though you don't really have that much power damage. But and then Call of Valor does a 2,700 barrier, and it gives Vigor for 10 seconds, removes 3 conditions, and then gives resistance for 2 seconds. And it's also a blast finisher, right? And you're getting those extra boons from this trait in tactics, which is also going to give you some concentration. And then obviously when you use your shouts on allies, you're going to be healing them, so you have a lot of support on this build. And your heal skill is also a shout, so the synergy of this is going to make your heal skill lower cooldown, which is also really nice because I'll get to this later, but it has really good synergy with Berserker. So first we'll look at Discipline. So I'm taking Crack Shot. This just gives you, so I'm using bow, right? So it gives you burning on your auto attack, and your auto attack is 2 hits. So it'll do 2 stacks of burn for 3 seconds. So as you can see there, 600, 600, and that's it. So it did about 1.2k damage plus whatever the power damage is on your auto. Not bad. It's pretty okay pressure, especially for how long range it is. Yeah, Brawler's Recovery as usual, and Burst Mastery, because you want to be using burst skills with this build very often, and also Berserk, you don't really have much time to use it anyways, so you want to get as many off in the time that you're in your Berserk mode as you can. And yeah, so tactics is pretty much explained. So let's talk about the Berserker spec. Berserker is usually thought of as a mega DPS spec, but I'm using it as sort of like a tankier spec, and then Berserk is my solo trait line to give me some damage, right? So Discipline is more of a utility spec, and Tactics is the support, right? And normally a Condi build would want to go like Arms or some other kind of thing to get damage. But that's not really how PvP works. You can't really go without a defensive trait line and a utility trait line, right? So Berserk is a really nice trait line for giving me the damage to be kind of like useful in fights, right? Because your Berserk skills are very high presence. So what I take in Berserk mode is Feel No Pain, and the reason I take this over Smash Brawler is because it's not really a DPS build, right? I'm not trying to stay in Berserk as long as possible, and this actually gives you a lot of survivability, even though it sounds like 1 second isn't that much. It really is, because when you use it as a stun break, you're often taking a lot of damage anyways, and just have the fact that you can have that second stun break, because you only have Shake It Off as your stun break, and that's a really good stun break, right? But sometimes you have to use Shake It Off as a Condi cleanse, and yeah, you won't always have that stun break. So having multiple stun break sources is always good. So Savage Instinct is good. I don't use any rage skills, so yeah, this isn't good. When you go into Berserk, obviously you get quickness and super speed, which is really nice to help you stick on the targets. and Dead or Alive has been buffed to give incoming healing increase by 10%. So this build has a lot of support for its allies, but it's also kind of sustaining for itself now because of this trait. It gets 10% extra healing from Vigorous Shouts, Mending Might, and any of the heal skills I have. So you also get a sort of like a divine intervention effect when you die while in berserk mode, so it'll give you 5,000 health, and that's really nice because a lot of times people think, oh, it's a berserker, we need to focus it. And even though, yeah, you are kind of easy to, it's a lot easier to kite on this build than a normal berserker that is, like a glass cannon, you're still going to be focused a lot because you're a support. And yeah, this helps you to survive long enough to get your team kind of like glued together, which is pretty nice. And yeah, so this final Grandmaster is just to kind of like prevent you from being too squishy. So when you stun break with Savage Instinct or Shake It Off, you'll get stability and might. And might is nice synergy, and so is stability. So that's all good. You could take King of Fires, but I find that the burn duration isn't really necessary because you already kind of want to take Balthazar runes because it gives you extra maximum health, and there's really nothing else that you want to take other than soldier runes. But because this build has Warhorn in it, you already have really good Condi cleanse in it. You could consider taking soldier though if you're like in a match against a lot of Condis, and even this gives a lot of toughness too. But yeah, I kind of like Balthazar. Soldier works too, but yeah. And then Wander's Amulet, it gives you some toughness. You could even go Rabid, but yeah, that would just be more tanky. So what you could do is you could go Rabid with Soldier, and let's see how much toughness I get with that. So I'm at 1.560 toughness right here, and then with Rabid Amulet I would get, or with Soldier as well, I would get 2.125k toughness, which is really good. So yeah, you can take Rabid, Soldier, or Wanderer's Ballot depending on how much damage you want to do or how tanky you want to be. And then on the bow I take Exposure, Doom, because those are just cover Condis, and Energy Cleansing on the Sword Warhorn because you want to be kiting with that. And yeah, so you take To the Limit, which is a shout heal, and what this does is it gives you a really good chunk of healing, but it also gives you full adrenaline and full endurance, and it does the same for your allies. So it gives all your allies endurance. So it's a really good support skill because giving your allies dodges gives them a lot of damage reduction, right? Because it's hard mitigation. Obviously, it relies on them using their dodges wisely, right? But also as Berserker, you can open a fight, and if you don't really need to save your heal for yourself, you have full adrenaline now, and you can start using your burst skills immediately. So there's no wind up to Berserker, and you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. And yeah, I chose Bull's Charge here because Bull's Charge is really, really strong right now, and it's probably gonna see a nerf, perhaps, but it's just really good for survivability, to be honest, because it gives you mobility, it gives you an evade frame, and you can also do some decent combos with it, like Bull's Charge into Fan of Fire, and Fan of Fire, we'll talk about that later, why it's so good. And then obviously for Great Justice is insanely good because it gives your allies and you might, and usually when warriors take for Great Justice, they're just using it for themselves, but when you put yourself in a team fight situation on this build, it's really, really good because it's giving out so much damage to your team. And then obviously you have Battle Standard. because as a support, you're going to need to be able to res your allies sometimes. And this is really good at doing that because it can also stomp enemies. And there's like a reticle for the inside is where you stomp, and the outside plus the inside is where you can res people. And then once you cast it, you can pick it up, but it's going to be pulsing might and swiftness and fury, so you don't want to immediately pick it up if it's in the middle of a team fight. But yeah, picking it up will reduce the cooldown, as you can see. And yeah, you want to pick that up because that's a really high presence skill in a team fight. You want to have that up as often as possible. So yeah, let's go over the weapon skills. So on bow, I showed you the auto attack does decent burn. Fan of Fire. Now this is a piercing skill, and it does a kind of like fan effect, right, where it gets further outwards as it goes out. And what that means is the closer your target is, the more likely it's going to hit them, right? So when you use this in melee range, you get all 3 arrows to hit. And this is a really long duration burn. 5 seconds of 3 stacks of burn. That does, as you can see here, 1k burn tick over that much amount of time. So that was like 6k damage. So trying to land Fan of Fire in melee range is one of the most important things of this build. And then obviously you can blast with Arcing Arrow, but this is kind of like a power coefficient skill, so it's not that important. Just use it for blasts. Smoldering Arrow is really good because it has 3 counts, so you can just blind your enemy and use this as a very defensive skill to kind of bridge the gap between your other defensive cooldowns. Like if someone's really hard onto you, then you can just spam blind in their face for a bit, and then you usually won't use the blind too often, so it'll recharge up for you. And then pin down is a really strong ability too. It's kind of hard to land because it's slow and very telegraphed, but if you do land it, it can set up some nice burst, and it gives you a really long 6 stack of bleed, so it does really good damage. And yeah, you can set up your Bull's Charge into a Fan of Fire into that, and then maybe get your burst skill out there. And yeah, just the bow, Scorched Earth. When you get into that, it's gonna be a kind of like it's like a terrain skill, if that makes sense. Where if you use it, it needs to be on terrain for it to work. Like flat terrain. So if I use it on like a cliff, it'll go until the cliff edge and then it'll stop. So you kind of want to use this on node where it's flat. You don't want to be fighting people off node with the longbow too much, because it'll do funky stuff like this, and then it only does like 1 square. It's actually like 2 squares, but it's supposed to be like 3 squares. So yeah. So just try to de-target it as well so you can aim it better, because oftentimes it'll try to lead on your opponent and it'll just do it like not on the node. You want to cover the node with the Berserker F1. So yeah, just de-target that and just aim it over the node, and that'll give you probably the most damage out of it. And then sword is really nice because you have a lot of mobility for kiting if people are chasing you, but you also have a lot of support with the Warhorn, so it's a very survivable weapon set. And yeah, it also has a little bit of Condi on it, which synergizes with your build because this is a Condi build. And Final Thrust can do 1.6k damage. It's not that good, but it can do some bleeds if they're below 50%, so that's pretty good. And yeah, so Charge is really nice for setting up burst for your team, and if I use Charge on myself, I can do that into that. It's okay damage, you know, it's not amazing, but yeah, the burst skill in Berserk is kind of interesting too, because when you use it, it's kind of like a mobile fire attack, right? So you can use it and you can be facing away from your opponent, and So like you can use it while kiting like this. It's really versatile. And it also blocks projectiles, which is a very little known fact. So it's very nice for chasing a lot of like rangers and stuff and being very aggressive while preventing any counter pressure. So yeah, that's pretty much the Berserker build. You want to play very aggressively as a support, and yeah, just kind of like give your teammates, kind of like top them off and give them a little bit of support, but stay on top of their target and CC them with immobilizes and stuff. And yeah, so this is going to be a Berserker Condi support Berserker build match. And yeah, so the role of this is not really to support, but to kind of like exist in team fights that also kind of gives your team support. So like I'll be doing damage and focusing targets like a damaging class would do, but it'd also be like supporting my allies and kind of like preventing them from getting too much pressure. So, and then I also have the banner utility, which can res my allies and also stomp. So it's really nice. And what I do there is I give out all my Warhorn utility to my allies, and then I immediately just go for the kill, right? Because my support comes from just using those two skills, and then there's nothing else I could do to support them, and then I can just focus on doing damage at that point. And obviously my shouts will support as well, but that's instant. I don't really need to focus on that at all. Yeah, so we get the kill on their Necro, and here I do a banner to just get a stomp and a res at the same time. Obviously it doesn't really matter that I would do the res because the stomp would also res, but yeah, that just makes it a really clean kill, no funny business there. And I go for a decap on far because yeah, at this point, you know, I'm not really like a hard support, so I can't really prevent my team from dying because I've especially used a lot of my big cooldown there. And yeah, I'd have to be killing things faster. So I just go for the decap instead. I know that this is actually a winning matchup for me, I think, because yeah, I have a lot of condition damage still in like a 1v1, even though this is more of like a supportive build. Like as you can see there, I don't really have too many cover condis, but I do have a lot of burn application, and yeah, there's a heavy burn application on that Necro right now that he hasn't been able to cleanse. And here I can't really deal with a one-shot Mesmer, so I have to get off the node, and I'm also being chased by a Berserker, so it was 100% the right play to not go for the cleave on that. And yeah, so I'm being chased by a rifle Berserker right now, a power rifle Berserker now, so I'm just kiting off the node. And my F1 is a it's 100% Endure Pain, right, for 1 second. So I save that there for a quick trade, and then I keep kiting off. And I think here, yeah, I'm using line of sight to avoid the Mesmer, and then I can go back to the kite spot over here when they chase me and use my mobility to get away. Now this build has pretty decent mobility. That's kind of the reason why I take Bull's charges, because mobility is a pretty heavy survivability. It helps you survive, right? So even though I'm not really going for a huge Bull's charge combos a lot of the time, it's still usable in that way, but often it's more used defensively, to be honest, on this build. You could take another shout, but yeah, it's not really necessary, I don't think. I think that Bull's charge probably gives you better value because it's just, as I said, an overpowered skill. And yeah, right there I did a really nice Bull's charge into Fan of Fire, which did a lot of damage because he couldn't cleanse it. And we can just get those 2 kills there with my Thief. And actually I go up here, I try to, yeah, I support this downstate 1v1, which they would have died in. And I think I go for the cleave here, yeah. So I put some burns on the downstate body because I know that my one ability that does the most damage is Fan of Fire, right? And then I go back to resing to kind of like put out cleave while also rezzing, because like the main thing is like I don't want my teammate to rally, but I also need to I need to prevent my ally from rallying them. And also there just got another banner value, and I'm just going to chase this thief with auto attack on longbow, which is actually pretty good for pressuring thieves, because their ports, unless they use line of sight with the port, it doesn't really prevent you from poking them down with the longbow. So it's actually pretty good. Like, it does pretty decent pressure. It baits out definitely cooldowns and stuff there. Here, yeah, there's no way that this warrior gets this res because I have my berserk up, and yeah, he's just gonna run away. So my team is actually dying at mid right now while I'm being chased by this berserker. So I can't really go mid. I can't really go home because it looks like someone died there, and I'm being chased by someone. So I think I just need to regroup with my team. My thief got far, and it looks like we're actually regrouping towards mid. So I'll maybe get a decap. Yeah, I just saw the mesmer stealth there. So what I just did was I double dodge, and then I used my heal skill just to get, and here he opens on me. It's not a very good burst, but I see that the warrior is here as well, so I have to start using kite spots. I use all of my leaps to get better positioning, and now I'm pretty safe. And if the mesmer decides to stay, they're not really a 1v1 spec. You know, this is sort of like a 1v1er slash support slash roamer in a way. So a hard like roamer DPS will probably lose to me, right? So I have an advantage against the mesmer in 1v1, especially because they don't have much Condi clear. Like if I was a power build, it'd be a lot easier for them to deal with me, but because I'm Condi, my damage sticks, right? So yeah, just getting chased by this berserker. I actually don't know why he's going for the gate there. It's probably because he thinks his team is so far ahead, but he kind of tunnel visions it, and he underestimates the power that I can do to him, and he actually dies. So at this point, though, we need to get back on the map, and I'm not really sure why my berserker came to help me cleave a down body when the mesmer on the node is free capping, but you know, you can't win them all. And yeah, as you can see here, the mesmer is forced to distort. I stand on the node and allow my thief to chase. And yeah, so now we're kind of like stabilizing. Not really though, because we're dead at mid. But we do have far and home, but they're going to respawn and recap far. So we need to win mid fast. So I need to get into mid and start making a play. But our core necro is dead as well. And I don't think I can banner that because it's already dead by the time I get there. But their necro is pretty low and pressured, and I might be able to get a banner stomp on that. Let's see here. Oh, the Revenant. Yeah, the Revenant's pretty low. I know they have resistance because it looks like a Condi Rev. So I have to be careful not to overextend, even though it looks like they're really low HP. So I retarget back to the Necro, and I start precasting my banner, but my teammate rallies them before I'm able to do that. And yeah, I get rushed down by 3 people afterwards. So yeah. So we're losing home, we've lost mid, and we're getting far back again. And it looks like our Necro is going to regroup towards home, and our Thief is going to try to go towards mid. Our Warrior actually didn't cap far. Probably because the people that snowballed at mid are going to him at far, right? So yeah, he's 1v2, and I go to far to try to help him, but it looks like he's already dead. So I get out my banner, which I didn't waste at mid, and I get the res there. Now I want to help him focus down someone. I pick up my banner first, and yeah, the Necro is a really good target. I get off my Fan of Fire, and the Necro is really low, just off of that one skill that I landed on him, because it looks like he didn't cleanse it. And yeah, my warrior dies again, so there's really nothing I can do because it's like a 1v3 at that point. So I just have to line of sight and make sure that I don't die, just survive as long as I can. That's one of the things that I like about this build is it has survivability. That's really necessary to almost any kind of build, in my opinion, because dying in a match is one of the worst things you can do. Like, getting kills is fine, but if you die to get a kill, then it's not worth it because you lose map presence. So yeah, I survive, and I survive long enough to push back into this 1v1 against their Berserker and get the kill, right? So not dying there was insanely good for us. And yeah, then my team comes into +1 and already won match. Like, you know, you can't win them all. Your teammates don't really rotate, even if you do a lot of work. I think I died once this game, so I was doing pretty well this game, but it looks like it wasn't really winnable. So yeah, I just cleave this body as fast as I can. So I do Fan of Fire into my Berserk skills, and yeah, I just want to focus these kills down. It's not winnable at this point, but we can at least get some kills, get some extra points on the board. So yeah, that's kind of how this build plays out. Sort of want to avoid getting focused because you don't have any hard defenses. You just have a lot of healing and stuff like that. So you want to be kiting around a lot and then poking and getting Condis on people and then kiting around while those Condis are out. And then also just helping your team in whatever way you can with either your support or just utility of banners or like immobilizes and stuff like that. And finally, we have a build with a greatsword. So yeah, this is not too interesting to have a Spellbreaker with a greatsword, and but it is using a hammer. So hammer is a really interesting weapon for warriors. I think it's probably one of the most fun weapons. It's just really slow and it doesn't fit with the pace of the meta so much, but it works out because of the Spellbreaker elite spec, and we'll go over that in a bit. So Demolisher strength, pretty standard. Cleansing on hammer because you can do a lot of plays where like you're blinded and then you swap to hammer, and then you have brawlers, whatever it's called, brawlers recovery and cleansing, and then you remove the blind, and then you can get a nice staggering blow off and then start your CC combo there. So that's nice. And then revocation, remove a boon, because you know you want to be removing boons with this build, especially because stability, if you remove stability, then you can start CCing your enemy. And then energy and battle on the greatsword, that's pretty standard. So yeah, let's look at the traits. So pretty standard here: peak performance, forceful greatsword, and might makes right. And so discipline and strength are pretty much the same for the meta builds, right? Like this is what is kind of like fun to play as a warrior, right? Is to be able to use your class mechanic and then to have kind of like this tankiness and this damage at the same time. It's not too creative, but here's where it gets a little bit more interesting, right? So gain protection after full counter, yeah, that's whatever. You could take dazes, inflict immobilize with full counter immobilizing people, and that could help you land a lot of your combos better. But I feel like just having full counter days and giving the immobilize isn't that good, because full counter you're usually using as like a defensive skill, so not always getting the immobilize value there. But when you are using full counter, getting protection afterward is pretty good, right? Because then you can survive a lot better. So especially with a build that doesn't use shield, so you're lacking a lot of survivability, so you probably need this trait to make up for that. And here's what's really interesting about Spellbreaker. So whenever you daze, stun, pull, knockdown, knockback, launch, you remove boons. So you can do a whole CC chain on someone and remove a ton of boons from them, because yeah, it's just really good for removing boons, right? And that's kind of like the theme of Spellbreaker, is removing boons with CC. And Hammer has 1, 2, 3 CCs on it, and then obviously full counter would also remove a boon as well. And that's really good with loss aversion, because whenever you remove a boon from a foe, it will deal some damage, not too much, but it'll also give you adrenaline. And adrenaline is really important for doing your big combo chains on Spellbreaker, because what you'll often end up doing is you'll use your F1 and then it takes up 1 adrenaline bar, right? So that's 10 adrenaline, and then when you CC them, you're going to hit them, which is going to give you adrenaline, and then you're going to CC them, which is going to remove a boon, which is going to give you adrenaline, and then you can kind of follow up by swapping into your greatsword and using your burst there. And it's all about kind of like comboing all of your bursts together, and in that way you want to have as much adrenaline in your burst as possible, right? So this trait kind of allows you to do some nice, combos, in other words. And then obviously you gain attacker's insight, which gives you ferocity and power whenever you disable people, which is pretty nice. And also, whenever you land full counter, it refreshes your burst skills, so that gives you even more combo potential. And then I'm taking Mage Bane Tether, which gives you a ton of might, which is synergy with Might Makes Right, and it gives you more of that combo potential for pulling people in, CCing them. It'll probably remove a boon as well, and then you will be able to land because people are trying to run away from warriors, right? Because they are the massive damage in melee range, so it helps you to prevent people from kiting from you, and then if it does pull them in, you can get some really good hammer combos off. And yeah, so Shake It Off, normal. Frenzy I take instead of for Great Justice, because the quickness is a lot better for your combo enabling. And then obviously Bull's Charge, because first of all, it's an insanely good skill, but also because this is a combo build, and yeah, you want to land some stuns to land your combos. Obviously Rampage as well. So yeah, and then Healing Signet. Let's talk about the warrior weapons. So Greatsword is pretty standard, right? You have a lot of mobility on the 5. You want to land your Greatsword 3, which is an evade as well. You want to land it through the enemy, so you want to kind of move out of their hitbox a little bit and then go through it to get the most amount of hits. Whereas if I stand inside their hitbox or too far away from it, it will give you less hits. And yeah, the Greatsword 2, you only really want to do that when someone is stunned, or you're cleaving a downstate body. The Greatsword 4 is just kind of like a ranged poke. It's not too useful on this build. And yeah, the Greatsword burst is very interesting because it gives you fury and all, which is nice, but it scales in damage with not your adrenaline, but with the enemy their health percentage, right? So basically what this means is Spellbreaker's Greatsword F1 does the same amount as a core warrior's Greatsword F1. So in other words, landing as many as possible is better than landing a huge triple bar adrenaline burst. And this is really nice because full counter also recharges Arcing Slice. So you can do things like going into the fight. Obviously, you're not going to land these for free like you are on these bots, but right, like land this, and then I can do full counter, and then it CCs them a little bit, so I gain some adrenaline, and then I can do another, and then at this point I can, obviously swapping weapons is what you want to do a lot, because it gives you more adrenaline, and then yeah, you just land your burst combos, and yeah, you get a lot of adrenaline from doing these combos because you're often swapping weapon between your combos, and you're often CCing in your combos. So yeah, let's go over what the hammer does. So you have Hammer Shock. This is a really nice range skill because it has a wide cone. Look at how wide that is. And it cripples, so it allows you to bait out a lot of dodges on people, because when people are crippled, they want to keep moving at the original speed they were moving before they were crippled, and dodging kind of ignores that cripple, so it often makes people want to dodge, and then after they dodge, right, you can land a really nice Earth Shaker in there. And once you do land your Earth Shaker, right, you get the tether on, you can pull them, and then yeah, you can land a lot more skills after that. But generally, Staggering Blow is the best combo enabler this build has, because it's a very fast animation and it's not a very obvious animation. So if you look at Backbreaker, this is a 3-second knockdown. If they're weakened, it's 4 seconds. But look how long the cast is and how telegraphed it is. Whereas the 4 skill, it's kind of quick. So you knock them down, and then after that you can start enabling the combo, right? So you'll do the 4 into maybe an Earth Shaker, and then at that point you'll have the tether on them. You can pull them with the tether, and then you can Bull's Charge, and then at that point you may have your Earth Shaker back up again, and yeah, you can swap the Greatsword and use your F1, and a lot of stuff. And obviously you'd have Frenzy up as well. So yeah, it's really good for doing a lot of combos, as I've mentioned I think plenty of times already. So yeah, let's just get into the video. So the role of Hammer Spellbreaker is it's able to 1v1 just like normal Spellbreaker. It's maybe a little bit worse, but it's definitely better at 1v1ing than the core Warrior build from earlier. And it's also very good at scaling up in team fights, because it has so much AoE damage and control that you can just kind of like spam out your abilities in a team fight, and then kind of like get out cooldowns, and then find a focus target when someone appears to be low or something like that. But yeah, so I head to mid at first, and I see their Necro. This build is really good at focusing Necros because of the amount of CC, right? Necros, they don't deal well with getting focused. So I land a nice random F1 there, which gets the tether, right? So the hammer will do a stun and then get the tether. Which is kind of nice because it lines up more CC. But chasing thieves is probably not something that I want to do, so I just go and cap home, and the thief is now on my Mesmer. So I try to peel for them a little bit, but they instantly down. I get some CC off, but I've got a Mesmer spamming blinds and stuff on me as well, so I need to kite, and I Rampage because Rampage gives me a lot of survivability. Usually you want to save Rampage for kind of like outnumbered situations. And I'm really low, and I have to go to a kite spot here and actually land my 4 into 5 into hammer 2 into greatsword F1, which is that's the hammer burst right there, is that combo. That's the core of it. And I land a really nice greatsword 3 into the wall there, which is gonna get their Mesmer really low, and I can chase that down. So now that's kind of like a 2v2, and while my teammate died in the 2v2, we sort of won because I turned around and got that kill very quickly, because the hammer 4 animation is deceptively quick, and if they don't have stun breaks, I can turn around and do a full 100-0 combo. So there's always that comeback potential on a hammer build, which is really nice. So yeah, I get that kill, and yeah, so it looks like we're winning mid. We won home, and we're winning far as well. So all I want to do is just watch for respawns, right? So I don't want to get decapped everywhere. So I kind of want to not push into far. I see that we're getting decapped at home, but there's not really much I can do about that because I'm not going to get there in time. So I just decide to kill this Necro who's by itself, because if the Necro does survive and their team pushes in from somewhere else, then we're going to be in a really bad spot. So we really need to get this down to keep staggering the enemy, which is why I rampage. And yeah, get this kill. So the thief ended up full capping home because I decided not to chase it. So if I had chased the thief into home instead of getting that kill at mid, then the thief would be +1ing the Mesmer right now with the Necro. So the Mesmer would probably die while I'm capping this node, but instead we have the Necro dead, and now the Mesmer has to 1v1 a thief while it has a down body there, which is kind of awkward, but definitely a much better situation than if I had allowed the thief to abuse me with its mobility. So yeah, you don't want to be chasing decaps too much. You want to just get the kill while you're there and put your team in a situation where they're not too volatile of a fight where they can easily just lose it very quickly. And that puts us. Actually, did the Necro get rezzed? I don't know what the yeah, the Necro might have got rezzed. So maybe that was bad for me to leave the Mesmer to, yeah, maybe that was bad for me to trust the Mesmer to deal with that down body instead of greeting for the node, but that's kind of their fault, to be honest. And right there, I actually peeled for my what is that, an Ellie or a Ranger there? I peeled pretty well there because the Hammer 3 is such a wide cone that it's really good at cleaving out Mesmer clones. And yeah, if it crits, it can like one-shot them. And that's really good for the Mesmer matchup as well, because your Hammer just it removes all of their clones, right? And that's just really good. And here I just have amazing cleave with full counter. So my Greatsword F1 into full counter into another Greatsword F1, and then I can swap, do a lot of CC with my Hammer, and then it just, the build flows with its combos very well. If you hit stuff, it just kind of like you can follow through very easily. So now we've won far and we're winning mid, and now we've also got the kill on the thief at home, but I think they're gonna respawn on far, so I don't really want to go in there because my team probably, yeah, they want to get out, right? But I go in anyways because I want to split their team. I see that they are trebbing us, so that's kind of weird. So I have to rampage because I got so hard pressured by that treb shot. And yeah, I kind of, okay, I'm getting pistol whip now, so I have to be careful. But yeah, we get +1 by our team as well, so this is a very safe situation for us. So I just keep cleaving that out, make sure that there's no potential of me dying, and then I rotate out. So the thief is now on mid. I land a really nice Earthshaker to prevent the decap, and yeah, we get that kill. And I want to move on towards home, where I can take a 1v1 with the Mesmer. I go for the node just to bait their Mesmer to stand on it with me. If I fight a Mesmer on node, I actually have a way better chance of winning. But if the Mesmer kites me off the node, then they have a way better chance of winning. So yeah, I kind of want to force them to contest the node. And because this Mesmer greeds for the node so much, they lose a lot of their advantage in the 1v1. This is a very bad matchup for Warriors, but because Warriors they excel in a melee, right? While they can have a bad matchup, anything that's fighting them in melee has the risk of dying, right? So if the Mesmer decides not to play to the matchup, which is them kiting off the node, then they'll die, right? So what I can do is kind of like force them to choose for holding the node full cap or winning the 1v1, and it's kind of like a win-win situation, right? Because I get the decap either way, and that's kind of like any warrior build, right? Can kind of have that presence in 1v1s, right? Because they can force decaps almost all the time. And even if they're going to lose, they can kite off, but at least they got the decap, right? So now we have a lot of presence on the map, and I'm just kind of like playing back point for my team. I don't want to get decapped because I know that we don't have that much presence on far. We haven't really historically showed that much ability to, contest far very well. So getting decapped on home is really bad. But at the same time, I don't want to just AFK because I'm afraid to get decapped by a thief. So I want to kind of like bait the thief to go for the decap, and and then go for the prevention. I think the Mesmer and I were on the same page, which was a bad thing, right? Because we both wanted to prevent. We should have been swapping or splitting our roles a little bit better. So I should have stayed mid, and because of that, we kind of lost it. We lost the full cap, but we are getting kills. This is actually a game that I don't really need to do too much in, to be honest, because my team is actually doing pretty well. They're not hard feeding like in the Berserker game, but just like the rotation of a 1v1er is kind of important to see here. Like the build combos are very fluid, and once you get those down, you can really feel like you're doing a lot in fights. But it's sometimes hard to find matchups that people will fight you in because they'll often try to out-rotate you, because the Warrior is kind of slow of a class relatively to like Revenants and Warriors. So here I just get in a 1v1. It's actually a 2v1 versus a Guardian. And I'm just going to chase that Guardian. As you can see, right, he's trying to out-rotate me. But at this point, I think that the Guardian is probably the best target for me to chase, because we have most of the map anyways, and he's by himself. But normally, how a 1v1er wants to rotate is they want to split the enemy team. So that's kind of what I did at the beginning of the game, right? I saw that my team was wiping at far, and I decided to push into a losing fight, because as a 1v1er, I can stall that losing fight from actually losing much longer. And here I'm kind of in like a 2v3 situation, right? There's really not that much kill potential for me because they have a support here, but I can always survive. And what I do there is I precasted a Earthshaker, because I know that the thief wants to follow me and go for the kill, and that actually prevents me from dying there, because the thief is really scared of getting one-shotted by my combo. And because I landed a CC on them by pure uninteractivity, right? Because they didn't know that I was doing it. They probably would have dodged that if they saw it coming, but they poured it on me right into my Earthshaker, and that allowed me to peel for myself really well. So yeah, just sometimes just putting CC on yourself when you expect someone to be there can be a really big self peel. And yeah, you can see the power of just me, how much cleave I can do in team fights. It's sort of similar to the core Warrior, but it's more CC oriented rather than damage oriented. And just the Greatsword. What's so good about the Greatsword is that the Greatsword 3 ability is an evade while also cleaving. So you can do a lot of like stuff where you're doing damage, but you can't take damage back. And in cleave situations, that's so valuable, because oftentimes that's where the most dangerous situations are, when you get an enemy down and then you want to like cleave that down, but then the enemy knows that you're going to do that, so they put a lot of counter pressure near the down body. And so having Greatsword is actually really really good for those down situations. And yeah, at this point we've pretty much won the game. Yeah, get the tether on the hollow there, or the scrapper, and there's some cool combos you can do where I can like pull the tether and then like bulls charge away and then retarget back in, and it'll like pull them faster than they expect it, and then it'll pull them into like a bull's charge, and then from there you'll bait out a lot of cooldowns, or they'll just eat the full CC combo. But yeah, mainly you just want to know that a lot of your skills can be comboed together, so you don't want to necessarily like use them singularly, but have kind of like an idea of like a rotation. So as I showed at the beginning of the game, right, the most reliable combo is the hammer 4 because it's so fast, into the hammer 5, into the hammer 2, and to swap greatsword F1, and that's pretty much the bread and butter right there. But there's a lot of permutations of that because there's so much CC, so you can kind of be creative with it, and that's why it's such a fun build.